All right, we are in our championship video here. So we have done all 24 factions in various forms, and we have determined who is the strongest of those factions in their lore power rankings. And now we will take the best of every single faction in Total War Warhammer 3 and figure out who has the strongest legendary lord of all the factions. So let's zoom in with our first champion. It is Norska's champion. Wulfric the Wanderer is the least powerful of the 24 most powerful legendary lords of their factions. Wulfric is just a man. He is a duelist blessed by the Chaos Gods, which is pretty imposing. Good for you. You can do the tongue thing where you can get anybody to hate you, but that will not stand up to a lot of people in this list, and we'll be going through why. Now, if you watch the previous list, you know why these people are strong. To determine where they are in the top 24, I will mostly be talking about why they beat out the person before them, rather than their own individual strengths. If you want to see those individual strengths, listen to the other video. I just don't want to repeat myself over and over again. In spot 23, second from the bottom, is the Skaven's most powerful character, Lord Skrulk. Lord Skrulk would beat Wulfric quite handedly, in my opinion. Skrulk has pretty much an auto-win versus anyone who doesn't have magical protection, and Wulfric does not have it. If he opened that sensor, that plague sensor he has, the plague mist alone would kill Wulfric before he even got to Skrulk, but Skrulk also has the ability to point at you with the Liber Bubonicus and just declare a disease upon you. Wulfric just doesn't have the magical resistances to buffer himself against those diseases long enough to even get a fair fight with Skrulk, or he would win, but that's just not going to happen. Skrulk is too powerful in the magic ways, and that is a hard counter to Wulfric, so he's out. Spot 22 goes to a Greater Demon, Kairos Fateweaver, very low on the list, but as far as Greater Demons go, he did not impress me whatsoever. Now he has plenty of magical mastery and demonic resilience to keep him safe from Skrulk's diseases, and that puts him higher on this list. Kairos would pretty easily either cast a spell to just burn away Skrulk or land on him and beat him in melee because he is a Greater Demon, and Skrulk is just a rat full of disease. But Kairos does not get very high on this list at only spot 22. At spot 21 is Drezoeth. Pretty close with spot 20, I must be honest, but Drezoeth is going to hit spot 21 for me. I feel like he is a good enough melee combatant on top of Cinder Breath to beat up Kairos in the air, and he is also a potent spellcaster, so it's not like he would just get dominated by magic and fall out of the sky. This Chaos Dwarf Lord, one of the ultimate lords of cruelty, would easily beat up the Bird of Tzeentch, but I personally think he falls just behind spot 20, though it is honestly so close to a tie that I could see any argument for him being in spot 20 instead. So in spot 20 is probably the most contentious rating I'm going to do for this list, but I do think Skrag the Slaughterer is just a little scarier than Drezoeth. Now, the only thing that is making me nervous about this decision is Cinder Breath, the Bale Taurus mount, but Skrag, from what I read of him, is like a force of nature. He is just an unnatural killing machine that can go into a frenzy and cast maw spells all around him. And the power of the maw fills him with unholy strength. I think if Cinder Breath landed on him, how I imagine it going is like trying to fire breath attack Skrag, it not going overly well as he just wanders through it and his skin is scorched and smoking, but a hook comes out of the fire breath, like slams into Cinder Breath's cheek, and then he stops breathing fire and is like, as like the knife hand comes up into his chin, brains him, and then Cinder Breath just collapses, Drezoeth topples off of him, and then it's just a Chaos Dwarf versus a very pissed off ogre with hooks for hands. And I think from there, Skrag takes it. Now, I could be wrong, and you could disagree. That's kind of the fun part of this list, but that's why I personally put Skrag at number 20, is his unnatural resilience and healing he gets from the power of the maw powering up his cauldron. I do think now if these two just met each other and Skrag hadn't had any time to kill anybody else and like feed them to the cauldron and get moving, like pure, he wakes up, gets out of bed and has to go fight Cinder Breath, yeah, he'll lose, though that feels unlikely. I feel like these two would meet each other in a battle between the Ogre Kingdoms and the Chaos Dwarves, and Skrag would probably be killing laborers on his way over, piling up the maw and building up his frenzy, so I feel like he would come in a little hot. Number 19 is Torox the Brass Bull. We talked a lot about him on his list and why he beats Skrag out of everybody, but Torox's flame axes would be pretty brutal, and his near invulnerability at all except for his weak spot would help him beat Skrag. Scrag would wander up and just start cleaving at him, and Torox would take the shots and hit back even harder, just piling Scrag into the ground and eventually coming out on top, claiming the cauldron for himself, though knowing him, he'd probably just tip it over and then yell. That's kind of his whole thing. Torox a Brass Bull, an unstoppable force of nature, and just a little bit better than the caster of the Great Maul. Coming in at number 18 is one of our first undead champions. Count Noctilus, leader of the Dread Fleet, would beat Torox the Brass Bull in my mind. As a spellcaster, he has a natural leg up on the Blood Beast of Khorne. Now, Scrag is also a spellcaster, and that didn't save him. That's because I think Noctilus is just a little... he's significantly faster, and he's more precise. And I feel like he would be able to correctly identify that, brass armor, halberd no go through, spot at neck, not covered by brass, glowing, poke? Poke. Hey, he died. I think Noctilus has the agility and the wherewithal to get that. And you might be like, well, Drazoeth can do it. Nah, Drazoeth's going to be bucking around on a giant Bale Taurus. And then if the Bale Taurus dies, then he's going to be too short to reach it. I think Noctilus is just more precise and faster. With his extreme vampiric speed, I think he could get underneath Torox's axes and just bam, right up into the weak spot. I think Noctilus could do it. I believe in my boy. And this proud von Karstein comes in at number 18. Number 17 was hard to place, but I'm going to go with Tsarina Katerin. Again, we are assuming that she is fighting on Kislev soil, where she's the most powerful, because, I mean, if you get into an argument about where she's fighting, she's going to lose a lot of places that aren't Kislev. So let's just give her her best day and put her in Kislev. I do think she would come up above Noctilus in that aspect. Her ice magic would be pretty hard for him to deal with if he was anywhere near water, and even if he wasn't, she is almost as fast as a vampire, but her magic is that much more powerful, and, you know, she's blessed by Urson and all that. I think she just has a little extra edge on how powerful of a spellcaster she is, and how unknown the lore of Kislev is. I think a lot of the ice spells would catch Noctilus off guard, because it's not anything he's ever seen before in his life. I think Katerin would take the win, especially on one of her mounts, either her ice sled or her warbear mount. Those would give her an extra little helping hand against Noctilus. So I do put Katerin above him, but that is very close. Noctilus is a super scary guy. Into the heavy hitters, we have Thorgrim Grudgebearer at number 18 for most powerful of the most powerful legendary lords. That doesn't even get him halfway up this list, but I do think he is very scary. There's just other scary components. And I do have a weird caveat, is I think Thorgrim is one of the weaker High Kings that have existed. Thorgrim was elected due to his vision and his wanting to purge all the grudges and restore the Dwarven Empire. And on the Throne of Power, he is very powerful. But as we talked about in his list, the Throne of Power is doing a lot of work for him. Like Ungrim and Belegar are individually better combatants. So I think if one of them was the High King and one of them was buffed up by the Throne of Power, the dwarves would get a lot further on this list. But having a bureaucrat and an okay fighter as your High King does hurt them quite a lot. Throne of Power is most of what makes Thorgrim scary, not he himself. So I think he would beat out Katerin, though. Throne of Power is very, very strong against magic specifically, so her magic wouldn't help her that much. And then his rune-forged axes of the Dwarven gods would probably beat her in a fight, I think. And if she even came close to his Throne of Power, it would be game over for her. So I don't think Katerin stands much of a chance against Thorgrim, though I think she would stand even less of a chance against maybe more powerful Dwarven characters on that throne. At spot number 15 is Luwin Leoncoeur. Now, someone might call me a liar because he beat Kugath Plaguefather in the End Times, and Kugath has not happened on this list yet. That is true, but Luwin did get the buff of a Shalian priestess throwing holy water of Shalia at Kugath, so Kugath was kind of fighting a 2v1, and that holy water burned him significantly, stopped his healing, and allowed Luwin to get a plunging shot at his heart. Before that, Kugath had killed Biaki and left Luwin on his feet, and he barely won the fight by so much that he lost to Festus the Leech Lord in a battle right after that. He was so wounded and tired that he couldn't even beat Festus. So pretty clearly, it was a close fight, even in a 2v1. I do think Kugath will be higher on this list, and Luwin is just at 15. I do think he would beat Thorgrim on the Throne of Power. That is super close in my mind, and I keep going back and forth on it, but I think with all of his blessings and enchantments, the Throne of Power would still affect him quite a lot, but it's not enough to, like, make him crazy slow or anything. And Luwin is just such an amazing combatant. He is incredibly fast, and I think Thorgrim's lacking melee prowess on his own would start to really hurt him the further you go up this list, and I think Luwin just clutches it out over the Thorgrim Grudgebearer, especially because he doesn't rely on magic to deal damage. And Thorgrim is specifically extra tanky against magic, so Lewin would not be as affected by that. Next up at number 14 is Karl Franz. Now, we did discuss Karl Franz versus Lewin in their specific video because they were also on the same list, the Lords of Men. It is just funny that they ended up next to each other on this list. The very short version of what I said there is Deathclaw and Byakhee are comparable mounts. Byakhee is slightly more skilled. Lewin is a better fighter. Lewin is a Grail Knight, but all of that pales in comparison to Gal Maraz. I think if Franz even gets one hit on Lewin, which I do think he would, I don't think Lewin would recognize how powerful Gal Maraz is until it hits him, and after it hits him, it is game over. I think he would raise his Lion Shield, take Gal Maraz on the shield like he's used to doing his entire life, and then he would get crushed. His arm would be broken, and he would get knocked off Byakhee and die. Over here for number 13, we have Grimgor Ironhide. Now, this is not Grimgor after he absorbs the incarnate, the element of beasts and becomes its incarnate, but still, Grimgor is a fearsome combatant. As we discussed in his video, he cleared out all of the Skaven's Hell Pit on his own, just killed them because he was pissed off, and then he left. He could have taken the fort, but he left because there was nothing left to kill. Grimgor is incredible, and I think the fight between him and Franz would go, Franz dives in, Grimgor dodges, like sidesteps Deathclaw's charge and hacks one of its legs off with Gitsnik. Gitsnik is incredibly powerful, faster than some even elven weapons can be. So Gitsnik is a magical axe. I think he would surprise Karl Franz with his speed, hack a limb off of Deathclaw and send Deathclaw sprawling on the ground, maybe even take off a whole wing with an overhead slash as he dodged the first blow. Franz would go sprawling, and then when they go man-to-man, Grimgor is too fast, Grimgor is too powerful and too aggressive for Franz to ever get a hit in with Gal Maraz. I think the entire fight would be Franz blocking and parrying Grimgor's swings until he got tired and beaten into the dust. Grimgor is just too aggressive, and Karl Franz's thing is if he hits you with Gal Maraz, you're dead. Grimgor would never get hit. I think he's just a hard counter to Franz. Number 12 on this list will be N'Kari, the greatest of the greater demons of Slaanesh. N'Kari is very scary, and to not go through their whole lore again, we'll just talk about their comparison to Grimgor. Grimgor is fast, Grimgor is scary, Gitsnik is scary, yada yada yada, but that's not enough to take out N'Kari. It's just not. N'Kari is far faster, far bigger, far stronger, and has magic at their disposal. Grimgor would be a mild annoyance. Probably N'Kari would get overconfident and Grimgor would get one shot in, but one shot is not enough to kill N'Kari, and after that, Grimgor is going to eventually get caught in those giant crab claws and pierced with the Witstealer sword and die. I don't think Grimgor would stand up to N'Kari very well. I think there's a pretty big gap between these two. Spot 11 on our list goes to Miao Ying, the Storm Dragon, the best of the celestial siblings. Miao Ying's powerful dragon form would probably be enough to combat N'Kari, plus her storm lightning and magical abilities would do very well against N'Kari being a demon and send him back to the demonic realms quite quickly. N'Kari, especially because she defends the northern wall of Cathay against the wastes of chaos, she is no stranger to fighting demons and is probably well versed in it. I also think her like serpentine form would be hard for N'Kari to really grasp and do much damage to, but it is a pretty close fight, and if you told me N'Kari beats Miao Ying, I wouldn't really doubt you. I'd be like, oh, okay, that tracks. So they're pretty close, but I do think Miao Ying comes out ahead. Similar in power level to N'Kari and Miao Ying, but I just think clutching them out a little bit. We'll have Kugath Plaguefather breaking in at number 10, the final of the double digits. This greatest of the greater demons of Nurgle is a deadly melee combatant. Not as much from his speed, but more just due to his raw strength and girth. Kugath is a deadly combatant, and his spells are quite potent at drawing sickness out of you and really withering you before the fight has even begun, or during the fight you'll just lose the will to keep going as your muscles fade away into goo. Miao Ying and N'Kari do have some magical defenses since they themselves are magical beings, but I don't think it's enough to just overcome the raw plague power of being near Kugath. N'Kari would not have a good time cutting through his mass. His hit and run tactics wouldn't work super well versus the Plague Lord, and Kugath could easily just tank those shots and then return them to N'Kari. As for Miao Ying, I feel like she would get a spell cast on her where like her dragon's scales would just slough off her body and she would crash to the ground in a pathetic like, "Bleh," and then kind of like weakly try to get up as Kugath looms over her. That's just how I see that fight going. I don't honestly see her killing him. Maybe I'm wrong. Number 9, and currently getting pummeled by Kugath from across the map because I have him in sandbox mode, but for some reason that still allows Kugath to throw. We have Durthu, the greatest of the ancient tree man, the last Elder of Vengeance that exists for the Wood Elves, and I put him at number 9. With his impressive Sword of Daith, I imagine he walks right up to Kugath, and Kugath casts spells at him. The spell resistance imbued into some of his magical items and his body in tune with Athel Loren. He would take some damage, he would rot away a little bit, but I think he would last long enough, and if he got to Kugath, it is over. Those incredibly deadly claws of his, plus the Sword of Daith just plunging straight into Kugath's heart, the raw power and anger of Durthu would be far too much for Kugath to withstand, and he would be sent back to the demonic realms with ease if he had to fight this ancient tree guardian. Coming in at number 8 is another of our undead lords, the Lord of the Tomb Kings, the High King himself, the Grand Pharaoh of all of Nahakara. It is Setra the Imperishable. At number 8 on this list, I do think he could beat Durthu with his limited use of magic, but his very powerful talismans from one of the greatest empires that ever was on his Chariot of the Gods. I feel like he would just swipe at Durthu's feet over and over again until enough chunks came out of him or fire caught onto him that Durthu would crumble and fall to the ground. And once he was like laying on the ground or on his knees, Setra could actually reach his head, and I think he could decapitate him with a couple good charges. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Those two are very close. I just have a hard time seeing Durthu actually hit Setra on his way in, and the Chariot of the Gods is probably strong enough to keep him safe regardless. Setra is quite a bully. Now, we'll talk about it later, because if you remember who everyone is that won all of the things, we haven't seen Kolek Suneater yet. There is a non-canon story where Setra kills Kolek somehow and brings his head back, but like you don't see him kill Kolek, if I remember correctly. He just shows up and says, I killed him. I like literally don't see how that works, and that story has been declared non-canon, so I'll give him a bit of credit in that he's good at killing big things, but that doesn't mean I'm going to put him over Kolek, because I just think Kolek is done dirty in that story, but we'll get to Kolek later. Number 8 is Setra. I think he could maybe take Durthu, though I'm very hard pressed to make that decision. Number 7 is the High Elves' most powerful character. That is Imric on his Star Dragon. Setra would not stand much of a chance against Imric on his Star Dragon. The Star Dragon would land and instantly hit the Chariot of the Gods and wreck it pretty quickly, especially if Imric is following up with the Star Lance. I just don't think Setra has much of a chance here, and even if you put Durthu above Setra, I don't think Durthu has much of a chance either. A Star Dragon breath attack right on his face, and then followed up by the Star Lance's flaming, piercing, like, might into his chest would instantly set that tree on fire, and he would have a bad time. Imric could body either Durthu or Setra. Not honestly that much of a challenge for him. What would be a challenge for Imric is Vlad, and Vlad is specifically helped because in some of the books, he specifically takes down a Blood Dragon Lord of Nurgle. I know, it's both. Blood Dragon Lord corrupted by Nurgle on an undead Nurgle dragon flying through the sky. Vlad somehow flies up to him in a cloud, and then appears, duels him, and flies off with that Vampire Lord's dragon. So clearly, getting on top of a Star Dragon is not a problem for him somehow. In the lore, somehow he does that. So I think that specifically against Imric, he's going to do whatever trick he did to get on top of the undead dragon. He'll get on top of Imric's Star Dragon, and then just in a 1v1 duel, it is unfortunately not close for the Dragon Prince of Kalador. Vlad is just faster and better, with spells to help him out if he needs them. He has a vampiric strength and speed that even an elf can't keep up with. Even when as deadly and amazing as Imric, I think his Star Dragon getting entirely gutted by this comparison is really brutal, because he did benefit a lot on this list from thinking about, well, I don't know what blank would do against the Star Dragon. Vlad has this weird mist teleportation apparently, where he can just be like, what dragon? 5th is Skarbrand. I think he is just too powerful. I think he's just too big and too mean for Vlad to deal with. Any of his trickery would not really work on Skarbrand. And Skarbrand probably wouldn't be able to kill Vlad through the Von Karstein ring. Vlad would come back over and over again. But Skarbrand would be more than happy to keep cleaving Vlad for all of time. And similar to the Von Karstein ring, Skarbrand is demonic, so he can keep getting resummoned over and over, though his resummoning takes a lot longer than Vlad's Von Karstein ring. But if you're just counting one life versus one life, Skarbrand should be able to take Vlad Von Karstein. Vlad might put up a decent fight, but Skarbrand is too big for him to deal with, and he can't turn into mist and appear on the back and fight Skarbrand's rider. He has to deal with Skarbrand, and he will lose. Into our top 4, we have Be'lakor at number 4. The greater demon of undivided chaos. All of the chaos gods gave him boons at one point, and then he tried to become them. Didn't work out for him as the chaos gods tried to get rid of him. Instead, he became a lord of shadow. In his own demonic video, he was ahead of Skarbrand, so he's ahead of Skarbrand for the same reasons here. He can still fly, Skarbrand can't, and he was so powerful the Chaos Gods feared him, while Skarbrand was powerful enough that he mildly annoyed Khorne, and Khorne banished him. So, little difference in power level there. He would beat Skarbrand. Number 3 is my boy Kolek Suneater. One of the most divisive things about the videos I've released before recording this is Archaon versus Kolek. We had some disagreement there, but since I rated Kolek higher, I still hold by why I thought he was stronger in a 1v1 fight, and I put him at number 3 on this list. Kolek is supposedly a lot larger than he is shown in Total War Warhammer, and he was only defeated by the elves. They put him in ice and froze him and just kind of like, will live to fight another day against him. And when he got released by a Chaos Sorcerer, he immediately killed the Chaos Sorcerer and went to do his own thing. He smashed through the walls of Prague on his own. I think he's just too powerful. His command over lightning is too complete, and he's too literally large for Be'lakor to take down, even though Be'lakor does have some bonuses, using magic where Kolek is not a magic user. Kolek does have the power of lightning in a storm that constantly follows him, and he can summon lightning at will to strike his foes. That sounds like magic to me, so it's not like he's helpless against Be'lakor there. But I think his sheer size and strength would make it so Be'lakor can't kill him, and if Kolek ever manages to hit him, Be'lakor is just down for the count and back to the shadows for him. Maybe I'm wrong. They're pretty close, but I'll give it to Kolek. I just think he's a better combatant. Be'lakor's a better schemer, but Suneater's not going anywhere in melee. Number 2 on the list of the most powerful legendary lords, we will have Morathi. I hate her so much, but yes, she is the second most powerful being in Warhammer existence right now, in my opinion. A Slaanesh Dark Elf cultist witch lady, one of the oldest things that's still alive. Morathi maintains her youth through a bunch of rituals and all that yada yada, but I'm not supposed to go through her lore. I'm supposed to talk about how she would beat Kolek. Well, here's the thing. Be'lakor would eventually have to go into melee because his magic isn't as good at killing Kolek. I honestly don't think Morathi ever would. She would probably set up some sort of ritual or trap where she would just open up the ground beneath Kolek. That's not really magic Be'lakor can do. He's more about shadows and nonsense. Morathi has more of that earth-splitting stuff, so she'd be like, I have found this artifact, the Horn of Karagon! And then she blows it, and then, like, a crack opens up below Kolek, and he falls just into the infinite abyss. Something like that, or she'll conjure a fucking whirlwind that chucks him into the sky, or she'll freeze him like the other elves did, because the elves already froze him once, and Nagarond magic has ice in it, so I don't know. She's just gonna do some magic nonsense, and she's not gonna land to go fight him. Kolek's only recourse is hitting her with lightning, and she, being one of the most powerful mages alive, probably has enough negation spells or negation charms and amulets to just, like, absorb the lightning and not fall out of the sky. I just don't see Kolek beating her because she's going to be cheeky. This battle may take literal months, but eventually Kolek will end up either frozen or in an abyss, and Morathi will still be there, and they'll have never entered melee. And finally, at number 1, I also think it is not close. I do think the gap between Mazdamundi and Morathi is rather large indeed. Mazdamundi on Zlak is one of the most dangerous things in the Warhammer world so far, and I kind of spoiled it a little bit in my Lizardmen Lord ranking video, but Mazdamundi is by far the most powerful creature I have read about in these lores. I think if Morathi tried to fly up to him, Mazda would literally point at her with his 3 fingers and drag her to the ground as her mount just got grabbed by invisible hands, shoved to the ground, and he would crush her bones if he was really determined to. Like, if these two had a mind to fight, right, they know they're fighting each other. Mazdamundi can see the future. He can see whenever she's going to try to come get him. He can see whatever traps she's trying to lay. And while Morathi would have the best shot at taking out Mazdamundi, she would have to somehow trick his future sight into being incorrect, which seems less likely than her ever coming in range for Mazdamundi to grab her and instantly crush her bones with magic from a distance. Or if she gets into melee, she has to fight a frickin' Stegodon, and she will lose. Or she's minding her own business, setting up some rituals, and the ground opens up beneath her, and she falls to her death because she can't fly without her mount. Or she's in a city, and he uses Ruination of Cities, and the entire city explodes with her still in it. It's just... It's really hard to fight this guy. So out of 100 scenarios, there's 5 where she wins, there's 95 where she loses. Mazdamundi is the most powerful being in all of Total War Warhammer 3 until Nagash comes out. Hopefully you enjoyed the list. Even if you disagree, post what you disagree about in the comments, but please keep it civil and just throw in your little theories for why certain characters beat certain characters, why I'm wrong. You don't need to say you're an asshole. You don't need to say you're a fraud. You don't need to say you don't deserve a YouTube channel. You can just have fun. All right, goodbye, everybody.
Subscribe, yes, yes.